Transformative Scenarios, Reflections on Colombia's Peace Trajectory and Presentation of Future of the Cyprus Initiative. This panel discussion is coordinated with Reos partners, Juan Manuel Santos, the former president of Colombia, Muhit, Ince, entrepreneur and businessman, Marcos Zambartas, entrepreneur, and the discussion will be moderated by Mille Bojer, founder and director of Reos Partners.
Thank
Welcome.
you, Melanie. First, I want to just say thank you to the organizers of the Cyprus Forum. It's been a really interesting and rich day of discussions, and many of the topics that have been coming up over the course of today are really very relevant to the work that we've been doing with Transformative Scenarios. I'd like to start by welcoming Juan Manuel Santos, former president of Colombia and Nobel Peace Prize winner. We're very sorry you couldn't be with us in person, President Santos, but we're delighted to have you with us on the screen. And we hope you'll be able to come to Cyprus another time. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And nothing will give me more pleasure than to be there personally. I understand Cyprus, because I've never been, is a beautiful island, and I wish I could be there personally, but I am virtually for the time being.
Thank you. So the intention of this session is twofold. We're here to learn about Colombia's peace trajectory and the experiences of President Santos as a leader in a transition to peace. And we're also here to share with you a new initiative called the Cyprus Transformative Scenarios process. So just a few words of background about this initiative before we go into engaging with President Santos. Many of you may be familiar with scenario planning. Many organizations and companies may hire consultants or think tanks to develop scenarios about the future in order to learn how to best adapt, to strategize, how do we survive in a changing context. This process is different. The Cyprus Transformative Scenarios process is not about developing a set of scenarios to adapt to the future, but very much also, or primarily, about developing scenarios to shape the future. Also, these scenarios haven't been developed by a group of consultants or a think tank. These scenarios have been developed by a group of 36 Cypriots who represent a broad cross-section of society. So we have 18 Turkish Cypriots and 18 Greek Cypriots. We have people who are in their 20s, we have people who are in their 60s. We have people from across sectors and professions, business people, civil society leaders, academics, clergy, people involved in different movements, also minority groups. And so we've really tried to comprise a group of 36 who represent Cyprus. They don't wear a hat of any specific institution. They're not representing an institution. They're participating as individuals. And this group has, over the past 4 months, worked extremely hard through 3 meetings, day and night, literally, to co-create and develop a set of scenarios about the future of Cyprus, tracing different possible trajectories of the future of the island. It's really important to understand that the scenarios are not proposals. They're not negotiating positions, they're not options. They're also not predictions. So when we work with the future, of course, it's impossible to predict the future. That's not how we measure our success. What they are is really imaginations. So they're sort of like tracing a future history, drawing on the imagination of this group of people. The assignment that we've given to them is not to necessarily explore their wildest imagination, but to create a set of convincing stories. Given the reality of the world today, what are convincing stories, things that you think are really plausible that could happen in the future? And they've developed four such stories with the intention of creating mutual understanding, creating a deeper dialogue, and informing wise decision making. Now, I think over the course of today, I've really noticed a lot of conversations about what might happen in the future. So different people will comment on different themes and say this could happen in energy and this could happen in geopolitics. But what these scenarios do is they really weave all those different trends and risks and opportunities together into 4 different storylines. The method that we've applied is called the Transformative Scenarios approach. It was born out of the transition from apartheid 30 years ago in South Africa, when for the first time such a diverse group from across the political spectrum came together to develop scenarios for their country. And President Santos, who was not president yet at the time, was recommended by Nelson Mandela to try a similar effort in Colombia. And so he was one of the initiators of one of the very early transformative scenarios processes that took place in Colombia in 1995 and 96, called Destino Colombia. And he's referred to this initiative as one of the most significant events in his country's search for peace. And so here we are both to learn about his broader lessons about peace, but also to hear a bit about his experience with this approach so that you can understand more about the potential of the scenarios. The scenarios are currently being finalized. We will be launching them in a few weeks' time, and then they will be shared with the entire society, and hopefully there will be lots of engagement and really national dialogue around these scenarios. We'll talk more about that at the end. Before we hand over to President Santos, I would like to introduce Muhit, Ince, and Marcos Zambartas, two of the members of our scenario team. And they'll just introduce themselves and say a little bit about some of the insights they've gained from the process. So Muhit, over to you first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mille. First, I would like to thank to Cyprus Forum for extending their invitations to us, to our group. It feels great to be here. So my name is Muhit. I'm the second generation manager of our company, a family company business, which is 41-year-old at the moment. And I also have companies that focus on actually selling made in Cyprus products all over the island, from north to south, south to north. So I basically engage in green line trade. That's what I do at the moment. So regarding to the TSP experience, my personal experience, actually it was quite an experience, and it really helped me, I think, to lift up my case towards extended horizon about future of Cyprus. Because considering that we are just in our daily routine every day, and at the same time we are in an environment which is almost impossible to plan tomorrow due to the vague geopolitical environment that we are currently in. So it actually gave me a stop to start thinking about the future of Cyprus, about my kids, about our kids, about our children. So that was one of the feelings that I got after all this hard work. And the other thing that I'm pretty confident about, because as Mille said, we are a very diverse group of people from different backgrounds, and it 100% gave me the feeling that we are the public. We are Cypriots, we are the public, and we have almost the perfect representation of the society. So I think that was the most valuable thing for me, to able to engage with this diverse group of people together. As Mille said, day and night, we met 3 times throughout this past 3 months, and we studied, we work quite hard. So, and we also have some team members over here. I can see them, they're sitting in the front. So I would like to thank them all for giving this hard work, and to Marcos as well. So it was all about my own experience about this whole process. So I'm also excited about what's going to happen after the dissemination. Thank you.
Thank you, Muhit. Marcos, please go ahead.
So it's been 24 hours that Mille here mentioned to me that I need to prepare a 3-minute speech on what I do, who I am, and what kind of insight I have gained from the transformative scenario process. So what I do for a living is wine. I'm a winemaker, I have my own business, and one could argue that I am a creator of something very specific. At the same time, as a person, as an individual, I'm a bit confused. Sometimes. So the one source of confusion is that my passport states that I'm Cypriot, fine. My DNA analysis conducted by National Geographic suggests that I'm 51% Persian, 49% Italian. That's where the Zambartas surname comes, I presume. And at the same time, for 12 years, I've been taught in school in a dogmatic way many times that I'm Greek. I find that confusing, just food for thought. Now, from the transformative scenario process, it dawned to me that I need to be more active at a society level. Yes, family is important. I'm a father of two and a husband of one, yeah. And my business, of course, is important, but communication with the society is also very important. And actually, communication with the political elite is very important, because I do believe, and that dawned to me throughout this process, that the political elite needs our input, the citizens' input. So I put that in practice 3 days ago when I was invited at the Parliament, the Committee of Agriculture, to discuss a very serious issue concerning the wine industry of Cyprus, that it's manageable today, but maybe next year is too large to overcome. So together with other stakeholders, we entered the conference room in the Parliament, and out of the 11 members of the Parliament that comprise this Committee of Agriculture, only 3 were present. The other 8 were absent. They probably had more important things to do than attending a scheduled meeting with the industry stakeholders, trying to solve a problem of the wine industry that really contributes to the economy. So, you know, when I got the chance from the president of the Agricultural Committee to speak, I didn't hold back. I told him that this is unacceptable. I don't accept it. I cannot justify it in any way that the large majority of the members of the parliament are not present in this important meeting, and I'm sorry. So, yes, as a person, I can be passionate when the political elite doesn't respect my fair interests. And this is a message I want to convey today, is that to safeguard and to help our political elite to safeguard the future of our children, our businesses on this island, we need to be active. It's all about us being empowered citizens and empower other citizens to act as well. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcos. Okay, President Santos, are you there? Let's get you back on the screen. We have Marcos on the screen right now.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we can hear you. You're sounding a bit like Big Brother, because we're still not seeing you on the screen, but we're hearing your voice in the microphone. But let's keep going. I'm sure you'll come back. There you are. Now you're there.
I am having a bit of a problem. Sometimes the voice from you to me disappears and then reappears. I hope that...
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll have you speaking most of the time now, and you're coming through very clearly. But just let us know if you can't hear us. So I've asked Muhit and Marcos to actually ask some questions of President Santos, and Muhit will go first. Can you hear us?
It just stopped, now it reappeared again.
Okay. I'm going to ask Muhit to ask you a first question, and each of them will ask you a couple of questions, so we'll do it like a dialogue. Okay, Muhit, go ahead.
Yeah, to which direction shall I direct my question at? To here, there?
Oh, sorry.
Anyhow, President Santos, so it's my privilege to meet you, first of all. Considering the fact that we're going to launch our scenario soon, could you please tell us a little bit more about your experience to the method and how it was connected to your own trajectory, please?
Yes, with pleasure. The first scenario planning exercise that we did in Colombia was in the middle of the 90s. I was advised by Nelson Mandela. He told me how useful it had been for him to gather a group of different people and start this exercise. So I did the same. I called Adam Kahani, whom I never met, and told him if he could please help us. And he very generously came to Colombia. He told me to gather as many actors of our conflict as possible. At that time, Colombia was on the verge of being declared a failed state. There were not one, many wars going on. And it was even very difficult to get people together. But something very strange happened. When I started to ask the different leaders of the different sectors if they could come together, they did. And we then started to make exercise. I remember Mr. Kahani saying, what you did in a few weeks took South Africa many, many years, which is to sit together and start talking about anything. Well, we started talking about different scenarios. That was extremely, extremely useful for the first time. People who had been killing or trying to kill each other sat down to discuss something. That created trust, that created empathy, and the result of that exercise after various weeks was incredible because it predicted, this was in the mid-90s, it predicted exactly what happened in Colombia in the next 15, 20 years. When you read this document and go back, it's incredible how the scenarios that they described became true. I know this was not an exercise in prediction, but in this case, it became almost a perfect prediction. The other exercise that was extremely useful was concerning the global war on drugs. Colombia has been the country that has suffered the most and has made the biggest sacrifice in the war on drugs that was declared by the world in the 1960s, 1961 to be exact. This has been a failed war. We are not today better off, we are worse off. And so we started to try to change the paradigm of concerning the war on drugs. This was something that with President Obama in the year 2012, we decided to start to discuss possible alternatives. And so we decided with the OAS, the Organization of American States, to do an exercise of scenario planning in Panama with the different actors involved in the drug trade and different agents from the different governments. Well, it was so successful that the input of this exercise was presented to the General Assembly of the OAS, and the General Assembly of the OAS unanimously approved a resolution asking the United Nations to convene a special session of the General Assembly to discuss this issue. How can we agree on different alternatives on this war on drugs? And this General Assembly was convened in the year 2016. We made very little progress because other regions of the world were very reluctant. This is a very politically sensitive issue. They had not participated in the discussions about the different scenarios. So there was a very hard-line position. However, what had been discussed there in 2016 to today things have evolved in the same way that the scenario planning was discussed in Panama back in the year 2012. So these are two experiences that I think are very important, very relevant, and I am a witness how useful. In the case of the peace process, I always say this was the first seed planted to make peace in a war that lasted more than 50 years, more than 450,000 people dead, more than 9 million victims. And this was the first seed. And in the war on drugs, we're seeing today that this is evolving in the direction that we discussed back in the year 2012, 2013 in Panama and in Guatemala. So I can tell you that they were very useful, and I hope that this exercise is equally useful for Cyprus.
Thank you, President Santos. Marcos, please pose the next question.
President Santos, you have previously said that the work of peacemaking, that is getting to an agreement, is very different from the work of peace building. This is also relevant here in Cyprus and to the content of our scenarios. What is it to you the difference between peacemaking and peace building, and how can we combine them effectively?
Well, in any peace negotiation boils down to one fundamental decision. Where do you draw the line between peace and justice? Now, different conflicts have different conditions. It's very difficult to generalize and to say there's a golden rule to solve all conflicts. No. Each conflict have different characteristics and different conditions. But when you draw the line between peace and justice, then start trying to convince the people who wanted more peace or the people who wanted more justice to build a bridge. And that's what we did. And it was very important in our case to put the victims in the center of the negotiations. And the rights of those victims became the heart of the negotiation. Those rights are even stipulated in a Rome Statute, which is an international treaty that was negotiated precisely to help in the negotiations to reach peace in armed conflicts. The rights of the victims are the rights to justice, to the truth, to reparations, and to non-repetition. And so those rights became the heart of the negotiation. And there are two aspects that I want to underline. The justice. The justice is not traditional justice. It's called transitional justice. It's a different type of justice, sometimes difficult to understand, but it's justice that is geared to repair the victims. And so the perpetrators don't go to jail, a common jail, but they are sanctioned in ways that would repair the victims. And I want to underline the truth. My experience with the victims was that I thought that we were going to be the most reluctant to accept transitional justice, to accept a peace agreement. Well, I started to talk to many, many victims, and something very different happened. They, at the end of our conversation, said, "President, persevere. Don't throw the towel." And I asked them, "Why are you so generous? Why are you so generous in accepting that the people that did to you what you told me will have some benefits?" And they said, "Because we don't want other people to suffer what we suffer. And that, for me, was a lesson in life. That, in a way, increased my vision of the human condition, and it was very important. But the victims gave tremendous legitimacy to the whole process, and there's where you draw the line between peacemaking and peace building. Peacemaking is simply to sit down and agree. We will do this, we will do that. You turn in your weapons, you reintegrate into the political system, the civil system, you pay the sanctions, and that you sign. Peace building is much more difficult, is healing the wounds of after 50 years or more. It takes a long time. I make the analogy of building a cathedral, brick by brick, with patience, with perseverance. Because you have to persuade, you have to convince people to forgive, and that many times is very difficult. We are right now in that process of peace building. It has been difficult, and for example, the truth in the peace building process is fundamental. But the truth many times hurts. The truth many times is difficult to accept by the person who has another truth. So around the truth, the process of reconciliation is extremely important to approach that discussion about the Truth Commission, for example, with open mind and open hearts. And that is the way to heal the wounds of more than 50 years of war. In the case of Colombia, we just finished the work of the Truth Commission. Of course, many people criticize it. This is normal, but it is helping the reconciliation process, the construction of peace in a very important way, and we must continue. The Bible, I am a Catholic, says that the truth will redeem you. The truth in these processes do help very much to reconcile. So that has been the experience in Colombia.
Thank you. Marcos?
And thank you, President. Another question. What do you think, that's quite a good question actually, what do you think are the most important peace leadership qualities that are needed if we are to break an impasse of 50 years, not only from politicians, but from business people, educators, civil society leaders?
Thank you for the question. I think the exercise of Destino Colombia, the one that I mentioned at the very beginning, one of the characteristics and one of the conclusions of this exercise was precisely how you should approach these type of conversations. I will very quickly read the conclusions. How you can approach this conversation. Express differences of opinions without arguing. Don't stigmatize, and don't no personal attacks. You have to be sincere. Assume that others are speaking and acting in good faith. Exercise tolerance. That's sometimes difficult, but you must exercise tolerance. Observe discipline and punctuality. Respect the time of others. Respect others' right to speak. Don't get exasperated because somebody who is very different is speaking. Be concise. Know Don't repeat your ideas. Make it once and leave it there. Be inclined and willing to learn. I learned a lot in this peace process. I learned many things and I changed my mind about many things. And this is something which is important. Exercise confidentiality and discretion when citing other opinions. Be prepared to go back to the drawing board. Okay, we don't agree on this, then go back and let's try again. Put forward proposals on the basis of an agreement or plan. Be disposed to arrive to a consensus and call things by their names. Don't try to go around, be sincere. But I would say that the most important virtue of a leader of any kind, political or business leader, to get to be successful, to be a good leader, and get to agree on something with others who think differently, is to have empathy. And empathy, define it as the ability to put yourselves in the shoes of others. When you put yourself in the shoes of others, you understand much better why they think differently and why they act as they are acting. And that will help build the bridges necessary to get agreements.
Thank you. Muhit?
Mr. President, as Mille stated earlier, we're going to start the dissemination. We're going to go through the dissemination period and launch our scenarios. So would you please tell us what would you advise to the political leaders of Cyprus and to the society at large in terms of engaging with the scenarios? How would you advise to them to engage with the scenarios once the scenarios are launched?
Well, my advice, based on my experience, is that, first of all, you need to be convinced that in the end, some kind of agreement will be better for everybody. And so you have to do a lot of work in order to persuade the different actors that this is the case. Everybody will benefit if we agree. And the citizen, the leader, political leader, the business leader, they have different reasons to inform the process. But if all of them see that they will be benefited, that will generate a movement to reach a consensus. I would also say it is extremely, extremely important, and I repeat about empathy, to put yourself in the shoes of others and discuss how, if you agree and discuss with the others, all of the participants will be better off. There is a phrase that I use many times that I learned from precisely Nelson Mandela. He said, the most powerful weapon is sit down and talk. In our case, 50 years of war, we tried to solve our conflict, our war, military means. We failed. We sat down and talked, and today the guerrillas don't exist. Their weapons are in the hands of the United Nations, and they are reintegrated into society and now even members of Congress. So, dialogue. Dialogue is extremely important. Maintain the dialogue. and maintain a constructive dialogue. And I am sure that, because this is something that I am asked many times, are all conflicts solvable? Is there a solution for conflict? I am absolutely convinced by studying many conflicts around the world, because I studied many conflicts before embarking in our peace process. And by what I have seen after our peace process, that every conflict has a solution. You need political will, and you need to create the conditions. This is extremely important. Create the conditions for a successful dialogue that will end in an agreement.
Thank you.
President Santos, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on these 4 questions. It's been really enriching to hear your view. I've been working with Cyprus over the past 6 months, and what I keep hearing is that Cyprus is unique. You know, it's different from everything else. Can you hear me?
I'm sorry, the sound went away, but I wanted to add one more thing.
Yes, please go ahead.
And I know that you have it in your agenda, but I want to emphasize the communication of the scenarios of the process with today's social media, with what is happening on the world. It's all around of feeding polarization, and what is happening with fake news. I was a victim of that. I even lost a referendum on the peace process because fake news and because the social media was manipulated by the extremes, by the persons who do not want an agreement. So you must be very careful with that. Don't underestimate. I did, and I paid the consequences. Don't underestimate the power of fake news and the manipulation of social media. Be aware, take the initiative, and maintain the permanent communication of what is happening, the objectives, why you're doing what you're doing. Otherwise, the vacuum will be filled by the people who don't want any kind of agreement.
Thank you very much for adding that point. That's extremely important. Before we move on, I just want to check if there's anything else you would like to add, because that was a very valuable addition, so I don't want you to be limited by our questions.
No, I think this communications is extremely important, and also a very, very intensive diplomatic work with the countries, powers, the international community. In our case, the international community was crucial. Our neighbors. I imagine that in the case of Cyprus, having Turkey and Greece very much involved in wanting an agreement, having the United Nations and the different members of the international community is extremely important. And I think you have to generate that attention. The international community sometimes gets tired of certain subjects and leaves it to one side, and the international community has other agendas. You must retain the attention of the international community and the interest and the support of the neighbors in order to have a successful agreement.
Great. Thank you so much. I believe you're also willing to stay on the line for the next session, which is going to be about the Truth Commission. So you will be staying with us a little bit longer, but we'll be rounding off this session shortly. What I was just going to say was in my interactions with Cypriots over the past 6 months, many people have said the situation in Cyprus is unique, and of course it is. But I think what you have shared with us about the leadership qualities, about the human experience, about the difference between peacemaking and peace building is certainly also universal, the importance of empathy as well, and the fake news experience that you share there is certainly also a global issue that's present here as well. So I do believe that there's a lot of wisdom in what you've shared that's also relevant to this context, and we're very grateful for that. The scenarios, as mentioned, will be launched in a few weeks. There will, of course, be a report, but I want to encourage all of you to help us make this more than a report. This will not just be a report. We will have other communication materials as well. But most importantly, these scenarios need to be brought alive through conversation. So when President Santos talks about constructive dialogue, I know that in Colombia, the scenarios were debated in many different fora as well. And so our hope here is also that in the many different meetings, the many different spaces that take place, we will host some launch events, but that these scenarios get fed into the different conversations that are happening in Cyprus, and that they get debated and discussed. And maybe people have other scenarios to add to the list. The 4 scenarios that we're sharing are 4 scenarios that were developed by this group of 36 people, based on their imagination, based on their conversations with others, and their assignment to develop convincing stories to 2035. But they're not exhaustive, and I'm sure that others will have either other dimensions to add to those scenarios or other scenarios to add. And so the idea is really to fuel this kind of constructive dialogue about the future and to understand both the risks and opportunities that are confronting us. Colin Stewart spoke this morning about the importance of interactions of any kind between the 2 sides of the island. And he said when people interact, myths and taboos crumble. And I think many of the scenario team members would nod in recognition to that line, that this was a process where some myths and taboos have crumbled. And we hope that that process will continue as the scenarios are discussed and shared more widely. And so in some ways, the creation of the scenarios is only the beginning. We're not ending a process now, but we're really beginning a much wider dialogue when this group shares their work with the wider society. You can follow the project on cyprusfutures.org. Please do help us to spread the word. And I just want to underline what President Santos said about fake news. You know, many people have said to us, you're doing scenarios. People will think these are conspiracies, that you have some sort of inside information. You know, how are you going to protect the scenario team from online attacks? You know, we do our best along the lines of what President Santos said to track rumors, to protect from mis and disinformation, and to control the narrative. You know, that's the language at the moment around fake news. So how can we really make sure that we're as transparent as possible and that we're communicating as clearly as possible about what these scenarios are? As I said earlier, they're not predictions, and they're not the solution to the Cyprus problem, but they are an incredibly rich tool for conversation and for deepening understanding and creating a sense of shared reality and mutual understanding. And we hope that they will be acknowledged as such and received as such and used as such, and that they, in so doing, can have an impact by shifting mindsets and perceptions, and hopefully in so doing play a positive contribution to peace in Cyprus. Would you like to say anything to round off from your side, each of you?
Yeah, sure, why not? Well, personally, my hope is once the scenarios are launched, as Cypriots and as Cypriots at large, we all engage, we try to engage with what comes out actually, because these scenarios are for all of us. And because we are all coming from different parts of the daily routine, and we have all different stories as like at personal levels, we try to put as much as we could, putting aside our whatever the head we have outside doesn't matter, but at personal level, we try to put the maximum at the personal level, each of us. So we try to create something valuable and something debatable for the future, as Mille said. And I hope these scenarios will be used by our political elite leaders, by NGOs, by the society, by all of us, just to stop for a moment and just to think about the future. Because I know we are all busy, I know we are just fed up with the daily stuff, but I mean, those moments that we spent together just gave us that opportunity, and I think I learned a lot through the process. So each of us can do the same, or at least something similar, just to stop, pause their life, and think about our kids, our children, and what's going to happen within 10 years, 15 years from today. That's just what we try to came up with. Anything plausible, anything that we can imagine of, based on the fact that we know to get today, we try to put it there. So I hope you'll find it valuable, you'll enjoy it, you'll be thrilled. I mean, it sounds like a Hollywood movie, but you know, the scenarios actually are part of, they come from these roots. So I hope it's going to give you the same sense, and you're going to read them out, and just they'll make them just to stop and think for the future of our country. That's what I hope. Thank you.
What's your hope, Marcus?
I think Muhit covered pretty much my line of thinking as well. I just wish that, you know, this is the beginning of something meaningful.
Great.
An impact.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much for such an insightful discussion.